Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're your shortcut to being truly well-informed, uncovering surprising insights, and making complex ideas click. Today, we're embarking on a really fascinating journey, how we can access profound inner knowledge and, well, reveal our soul, our very essence through our senses, particularly the sense of sight. It's really about looking at the world and ourselves in an entirely new, incredibly deep way.
Yeah, and our mission in this deep dive is to explore some traditional wisdom that outlines three general stages of human spiritual work. The first stage, and that's our specific focus for today, is knowing one's own soul. We'll be looking at how our senses, divine gifts like sight, hearing, smell, even speech function as well, openings through which the soul's inner light can emerge and manifest.
Right, and it's crucial to understand that these openings, they're sort of double-edged, aren't they?
Mhm.
While they're definitely pathways to revelation, to inner growth, they're also vulnerable points. And as we'll discover, this vulnerability isn't just about, passive misuse, but also the subtle dangers of misperception, even when we think we're seeing spiritually. When we misuse a sense, say, engaging in forbidden sight or speech, we actually dim that inner light. We obscure the soul's manifestation within us. It's like smudging a window meant to let in pure light.
Precisely. And for this deep dive, we're really honing in on the sense of sight. In traditional wisdom, it's known as raiwai.
That term, it really implies a deeper, more profound kind of seeing than just, physical vision. The challenge is that our physical sight often gets limited to the material world's boundaries, the familiar forms. And when sight connects only to these physical forms, it can actually, well, obscure the soul's light. Our goal today is to discover dimensions beyond these everyday limitations, to truly see beyond the seen. It's such a fundamental contrast, isn't it? Our physical body, often associated with darkness or maybe enclosure, but the soul is pure light. So our journey today is all about understanding how to increase that inner light, how to really make the soul shine through our perception. Okay, with that foundational understanding, let's dive into some practical pathways. Ways our everyday visual perception and even our imagination can become tools for soul revelation. We'll start with what's sometimes called the yesh perspective, seeing the soul in the concrete existing world around us.
Right. And drawing from traditional wisdom, we've touched on various methods before that engage physical sight with a spiritual intent. These include things like contemplating the sky, observing water, focusing on a divine name, or even looking at a righteous person. Each of these practices uses our physical eyes, sure, but with an underlying spiritual intention driving it.
Okay, now let's consider the power of imagination. Dimion, right? It's a force ancient wisdom suggests is absolutely foundational to our very being. I mean, the very word atom for human is linked to dimion, imagination. It's a powerful mental tool. But like any tool, you've got to use it carefully, right? With awareness of its limits.
That's exactly right. Imagination in this context, it generally divides into two types. The first involves imagining holy things that have, known familiar forms. For instance, picturing the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, even if you've never actually seen it. Or visualizing Chinooka candles. This is considered positive because the very concept of these holy forms, though they are physical in nature, exists within the soul. Imagining them actually increases inner light.
Ah, okay. So it's about finding that resonance between a spiritual concept and a form we can mentally grasp, creating an internal echo of holiness. That makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. Now, the second type of imagination. This involves purely spiritual things, or attempting to ascend through spiritual worlds.
Yeah.
This is described as more sublime, certainly, but also extremely dangerous.
Dangerous. How so? What's the risk there?
Well, the main risk is corporealizing these spiritual concepts, essentially making them physical in your mind, thinking of angels or a heavenly voice in physical forms, maybe like artists depict them, that can reduce these elevated ideas to a lower material value. You're visualizing the unfamiliar in very familiar and therefore limiting terms. But the most perilous form is what's sometimes called imagination within imagination, trying to ascend through spiritual worlds. It's a practice Rabbi Chaim Vital strongly warned against. This can cause, well, a severe detachment from reality, and in extreme cases, even mental instability. For most people, I think the core insight here is that when we try to grasp the infinite with finite self-created concepts, we risk shrinking the divine. We risk distorting our own reality rather than truly expanding our understanding.
That puts a powerful emphasis on precision, on care in our inner work. Okay, moving from imagination to direct perception, let's talk about light itself. Since we see the body as associated with darkness and the soul as light, how does looking at actual light awaken the soul?
Right. Well, we distinguish between natural and artificial light. Natural light, like a candle flame, is considered superior. It contains an intrinsic deep illumination. Artificial light, like electric lights, when it's just a small amount, it's generally ineffective for this purpose. However, a great abundance of artificial light, where imagine many chandeliers in a grand hall that can produce an inner illumination. But this is crucial. It only works for someone who already has an inner breach or opening in their soul. Think of it like a small crack in a wall that's letting in a sliver of light. A huge amount of light won't create the crack, but it can help widen that existing fissure into a more expansive window. It lets much more light flood in. So it helps to expand an existing opening, not really create a new one.
Interesting. So even our physical environment, in all its colorful glory, holds spiritual keys. Colors aren't just for aesthetics then.
Not at all, no. In inner teachings, there are 4 primary colors: white, red, green, and blue, or sky blue. These are said to correspond to the letters of the divine name, Havaya. The principle is that denser colors relate more to material perception, while finer colors connect to the more hidden, subtle realm of the soul. And within this framework, white is identified as the most revealing color. It leads directly to inner perception. It's connected to the idea of whitening sins, which spiritually means removing the body's screens, the obstacles, to reveal the soul. The word Adam, human, is sometimes linked to Adam, meaning red or blood, representing the body's more material perception. White, by contrast, symbolizes the soul.
Okay, and this concept of white light,
Mm.
it connects to a really familiar everyday practice.
Yeah.
The white tablecloths we use on Shabbat. Why do we actually do that?
It's a perfect example, really. The 6 weekdays are traditionally seen as days of the body, right? Shabbat is considered the day of the soul, or as it's known, Yoma de Nishmata. The white tablecloth is a physical expression of this soul revelation. It expands the soul's light, again, for those who already have that inner opening. And the ultimate goal, even beyond white, is transparency. Shakuf.
Yeah.
Transparency is sort of above all colors. It represents the highest formless perception, a complete lack of obstruction.
Okay, now for an insight that might challenge our modern assumptions a bit, how can physical wealth, and even just looking at opulence, connect us to the soul? It seems, on the surface to be kind of the opposite of spiritual purity.
It's a really profound concept. The body's very existence is often described as a state of lack, always seeking to be filled, always seeking completion. While the soul is inherently complete, it lacks nothing. So wealth, both inner and outer, can actually be a revelation of the soul's completeness. This is why figures like kings and high priests were commanded to be rich. It wasn't about personal luxury. It was a deep internal spiritual concept. Wholeness, abundance, reflected outwardly.
That idea. Wealth is a revelation of completeness. It makes me think of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the one who compiled the Mishnah, a huge spiritual work, often linked to Neshama, the soul. It said his table was never lacking, always abundant. So this wasn't just comfort. It seems like it was intrinsically tied to his ability to achieve that profound spiritual compilation.
Indeed. And when it comes to wealth and spirituality, there are generally 2 paths discussed. Path 1 is what you might call breaking the body. This is the ascetic approach. Eat bread with salt, drink water sparingly, sleep on the ground, that sort of thing. This path completely negates the body's desires, allowing one to live, ideally, solely with the soul, unhindered by physical needs. Many holy figures definitely took this route. Path 2, though, that's about rectifying or sweetening the body. This is a much more complex and honestly very dangerous path. It involves manifesting the soul's inherent richness within the physical world.
Okay, this is where we hear those stories, like the Admor of Rougine living in opulent palaces, playing with gold coins,
Yeah.
drawing criticism from many. But if wealth is meant to reflect the soul's completeness, what about those who genuinely struggle, where poverty isn't a chosen path, but just a harsh reality? Does that imply their soul is somehow lacking, or is there a different perspective for them?
That's a really important question. For an unrefined person, physical wealth is often a downfall, right? It just feeds bodily desires, cravings. But for a highly purified individual, the soul, which is inherently rich and beautiful, is actually obscured by poverty and brokenness, by that lack. Opulence, in that specific context, removes those physical obstacles. It allows the soul's pure light to manifest through the body. It's an extremely delicate balance, like walking on the edge of a chasm. There's a saying, "You shall not judge the heart of a king." This helps explain why figures like Moses, considered a king, needed wealth. His wealth came not from, business deals, but from the refuse of the tablets, meaning from a purely spiritual source. It was required to provide the necessary physical expansion for his soul's boundless freedom to manifest without being constrained by the body. So for those struggling with poverty not by choice, the focus is likely on a different kind of inner work, finding that completeness despite external lack, recognizing the soul's inherent richness independent of circumstance.
That provides a much deeper context for understanding some of these historical figures and paths. Okay, to conclude this segment on Yesh, let's explore a profound principle from the Baal Shem Tov, the power of the actor in the acted upon. In Hebrew, Koch Hapol Bonafal. What does this actually mean, and how does it relate to what we see?
It means that when a person performs an action, all their spiritual and emotional powers, their essence really, get imbued within that action and its result. For example, they say the Baal Shem Tov could discern the intentions, the spiritual level, of a carpenter just by looking at the table he built. He could literally see the spiritual imprint left by the artisan on the object. Applying this to perception. Imagine reading a book written by someone with, say, impure intentions. It can negatively affect your soul like dirt clinging to something clean. Conversely, reading a book by a righteous person, a tzaddik, can transfer their holy power directly to you.
Wow. So simply looking at something or interacting with an object can either draw us closer to our soul's light or potentially distance us from it.
Exactly. Therefore, looking deeply at an object that a tzaddik used or created that can awaken inner light. The tzaddik's holiness, their soul, was effectively imprinted onto the object itself. This isn't just, nostalgia for a relic. It's more active than that. Think about this practical example. Contemplating an old kiddush cup, maybe one used for decades by a known tzaddik. If you look at it deeply with a specific intention to connect, to acquire some holiness from it, it can actually bestow a spiritual level by connecting your own soul to the light imbued in that cup by the tzaddik who used it.
Okay, so far we've really explored how to find and amplify the soul's light within the physical world, using our senses, particularly sight, as spiritual conduits. We've been talking about seeing the soul through concrete existence, what traditional wisdom calls yishko. But what if the ultimate vision requires us to transcend the physical altogether? Now let's go even deeper. Let's move to a realm where perception isn't about what you see, but maybe how you unsee, or even not seeing in the conventional sense. Moving into the profound Ein perspective, nothingness.
Yes. Here, we introduce this profound concept of Raya Ha'an. Now, this can mean the sight of the eye, but it can also imply the sight of the essence. Because the Hebrew word for eye, ayin, can also be spelled ein, which means nothingness or non-existence. This itself hints at a perception beyond physical form. Essentially, physical sight is like a garment for spiritual sight. Up until now, we discussed using this garment, this physical sight, to awaken spiritual light. Now, we'll explore methods of stripping away this physical garment to directly reveal that inner spiritual sight.
How do we even begin to strip away something as fundamental as our physical vision? I mean, it sounds almost impossible to consciously achieve that.
Well, we turn to the famous story of Joseph the Righteous. When he faced that immense temptation, Potiphar's wife, traditional wisdom lays out the progression. The eye sees, the heart desires, the hands complete the action. The key, they teach, is to stop the process right at the very first stage. The eye sees. Cut it off there.
And Joseph's method for doing this was truly remarkable. The image of his father's face appeared before him, saving him from the sin. It's such a powerful visual intervention.
It is, and there's a much deeper meaning behind it. Joseph is called Ben Porat Yosef, Ben Porat Ali Ayin, a fruitful son, fruitful beyond the eye. His entire spiritual edifice, his strength, was built on this ability, this drawing of his father's image. And this isn't just about seeing a righteous person, although his father Jacob certainly was one. It's presented as a universal principle for anyone in a moment of spiritual challenge or temptation.
So what's the core takeaway here then? Is it that true spiritual vision isn't just about what you see physically, but about transcending that physical form entirely, returning to some kind of primal, formless state of pure potential?
Precisely. Why does picturing one's father work in this specific way? It's not really about the physical form of the father or even their worldly actions. It's about connecting to the inner point of one's own existence, the idea of, from a putrid drop you came. All right, now, to clarify, this drop represents a state of ein, of formlessness, that exists for the first 40 days of conception. Before a physical form is even apparent. Think of it like a seed, right? It holds all the potential, but it hasn't yet taken on the visible, distinct form of the plant. To strip away physical sight, which is inherently limited to material forms, you have to return, conceptually, to this state before form, before material existence. Picturing your father's image is taught as a powerful tool to access this formless origin, to look beyond the physical form and connect with that primal, undifferentiated potential within you, the very essence that preceded all physical manifestation.
Wow. That really shifts how I think about something as simple as looking. It just makes you realize how much potential we might be missing in our everyday perception. We've journeyed through an incredibly rich landscape of ideas today, exploring how senses, our imagination, our environment, even our lineage, how they could all be profound pathways to revealing the soul. We've seen how what we choose to look at, and maybe more importantly, how we choose to look at it, holds immense spiritual power both for good and potentially for challenge.
We really have just touched the surface, to just scratch the surface of understanding these profound aspects of the soul. Choksma, that pure, intuitive wisdom. Baina, the capacity to understand and process it. And Da, the deep, intimate knowledge that comes from internalizing both, all of which illuminate the soul.
Yeah, this deep dive has offered us some ancient wisdom that feels, I think, surprisingly relevant today, especially in a world often saturated with fleeting visual distractions. It really asks us to be more intentional, doesn't it? More curious about how we perceive, and to recognize that dull-edged nature of our sensory openings.
Absolutely. It encourages us to recognize the deep, often hidden connections between our physical perception and our spiritual essence, and the responsibility, really, that comes with our power of sight.
So as we close, here's maybe a provocative thought for you, the listener. Considering all these profound methods of revealing the soul, what is one subtle shift you could make?
I said.
Maybe in your daily visual habits or your imaginative practices, something that could open just a tiny new window to your own inner light. We've only scratched the surface, as you said, of how we can use and even strip away physical sight to fully reveal spiritual vision. We invite you to keep exploring these ideas and asking those deep questions.